Yes, sir.
Town Manager, ready to begin? Okay, thank you. Good evening. I call this May 17th work session of the Morrisville Town Council to order. Thank you to those watching via live stream and those who are watching a recording of this meeting. On May 19th, a video of this meeting will be uploaded to www.townofmorrisville.org/government/live-video. There is one item for discussion this evening, FY 2023 Proposed Annual Operating Budget and Capital Investment Program Work Session. Martha Page, Town Manager, and Jeannie Hooks, Director of Management Services, will facilitate the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just pass it right to Jeannie to pick up where we left off last week.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to try to keep tonight as brief as I can. Staff really feels like with a front-loaded budget process, your hand is really guided where this budget has landed as of today, and that includes the CIP. And we think there's some good things in it and some things we need to look ahead and plan for. So there's not really much flexibility in the budget, we feel like, to move too much without impacting your core services that you felt was a priority and impacting future project planning, which was another one of your priorities. And then also in looking ahead for positioning ourselves with a good financial position as we work towards a future bond referendum. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit. The budget has really been an intentionally focused and council and community-driven process, and we feel like we have a really good fixed position now with operational and with our capital projection. So when we last spoke, let me move to our slide. We were on CIP, and we were really talking about critical shifts. And I just want to touch once more on this. What staff proposed with your CIP was really a solution to what was an unfunded project that we felt was a priority quickly emerging as town center development plans become more refined. It was an unfunded project. And the other item was addressing the misalignment and timing issue with Crabtree Creek Nature Park. We feel like the alternative solution of shifting those funding sources is a really smart and potentially viable solution, and we recommend going forward with that solution. We will work in the coming years in this next year with our financial planners to really reassess our debt model, really look at where it lands. I try to advance that and do a preliminary look at where our debt model might land based on where the CIP is projecting funding for projects. But we feel like the solution is viable and workable, and we would request to move forward with that. So from there, I'm going to drop right into our new stormwater solution. This is a very new initiative. This is something that has, again, purpose-driven. We've had a number of conversations on creating an actual stormwater program that we feel like meets and aligns best to the mandate that we have to uphold to with the state. So with establishing a new CIP solution for stormwater to address those 10 identified areas of concern, you have to have a funding solution to go with that. And 80% of the fee increase that we propose to go from 25 to 50, 80% or slightly more of that is really going to be dedicated to creating and the solution to fund this model that sits in front of you today. The first 5 years is fully funded. The next 5 years is going to be a hybrid solution. So we already really have a tiered fee approach or funding approach where we are combining in the first 5 years really accumulating and building reserves using that fee increase. We're going to put in place a position that can manage and help move forward in aligning better to the inspections and the management of this infrastructure plan that is separate to the general fund CIP. And then from there, we build in the next 5 years, potentially debt solutions and or use of grant opportunities. So there's some potential for grants, but I will go ahead and announce to you that staff did receive a notice that we are not actually eligible for the state-managed ARPA funds through the Department of Environmental Quality. The town does not meet that hardship requirement, and that's probably something we're going to continuously run into with Morrisville having good position good ability in terms of demographics and our fee situation, that might be something that we continuously run into, that we might not find that we're as eligible as maybe other neighboring jurisdictions. But we have applied for a type of ARPA grant through Wake County. We just haven't heard where we fall with that. And I think the project that we submitted for was the Sawmill Creek stream restoration, if memory serves. So on this plan, as I mentioned, Sawmill Creek, a reminder for me to make note that the actual Morrisville tributary stream restoration, that actually is Sawmill Creek, and I'm going to correct that naming mechanism because I think it's more readily known to us as that has been on our CIP for a while. But we have separated the stream restoration project out from the original project that was both a greenway trail and a stream restoration, because you have two different funding sources that will be paying for each of those. You have the stream restoration will clearly come from your proprietary fund, using the fee escalation from 25 to 50 to be able to fund that in the future. And then your greenway trail will fall in your general fund CIP that we'll use other sources for. So when we look at creating and establishing a stormwater CIP, and we want to tap into those reserves that we try to build, and there are reserves that exist today. They're about $1.5 million. Of that, we need to make sure that we retain in our model for this CIP solution and how we got to $50 for a fee is to retain at least 25% of that reserve. Just like in your general fund operation, you need to retain reserves to mitigate unforeseen circumstances that arise in your overall stormwater operations. So what would that be? In talking with Ben Mills, our stormwater engineer, he says when there are strong storm events, there could be breaks and areas of erosion, there could be road issues that you need to mitigate or culvert issues that you need to fix. And being able to address those emergency needs quickly, you need to have a fund balance retainage in your operations to be able to work quickly. So what am I saying here? You don't want to draw down on the reserves that you have too quickly. You want to be able to leverage your fee and be able to retain some of that fund balance that you already have to be able to mitigate any future emergency or natural disasters in this particular proprietary fund.
Before we move on, could you explain to me how the stormwater fee is levied? Is it like per person, per household, per acre, how is that exactly calculated?
So each year, what the stormwater department goes through is they identify what are the total ERUs per property. In this case, commercial is treated slightly different than residential. So residential, it's a flat $25, and I believe townhomes are half of that. The commercial units are based on how much impervious surface calculation there is that is an ERU count. So for instance, let's just take Morrisville Square. I think that one has about 50 ERUs. So 50 ERUs times $25 per ERU.
I don't know what an ERU is. I'm sorry.
The equivalent residential unit.
Okay.
That's the square footage per impervious surface. It's 28,000 square foot per ERU. Thank you.
2,800.
2,800 per ERU.
Okay.
So per ERU for commercial, whatever that's calculated to be, and we have that each year, a list, times $25 is what the annual cost is for a commercial, 25 for residential, and half for townhomes.
So $25 a year for residential?
$25 a year currently for residential.
So one $25 payment per household per year?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And then for
Billed
businesses,
on our property taxes.
okay, and then for businesses, it depends on the square footage, or is it assessed like if there's a mall, like South Point or whatever malls we have here? Okay, so that mall where the Walmart market is, right? So how does that get assessed? Is it like the business owner, does whoever owns the shopping center pay the whole thing? How does
It's a calculation based on the known impervious surface that goes through the stormwater department, and they identify what what is that number again? 2,800 square feet of impervious surface counts as one ERU equivalent. So for example, the one across the street, there are 50 ER units of 2,800 square feet of impervious surface, if that makes sense.
Okay, that does make sense. And
Okay.
then, so I'm sorry, it was how many units, how many ERUs, 28?
So for example, it's one ERU equals 2,800 square feet of impervious surface that is calculated based on what's known developed impervious surface area.
Okay, and so and that's assessed per ERU per year. So if there are 10, they pay $250 per year. And we
It's
would-
one bill once a year.
Right, and we would be upping that to 500.
Right.
Okay, so for example, what does the Chinese restaurant up here? It's probably not even 2,800 square feet. What did they pay for per year?
Let me just give you a couple of examples for
that'd be
context
great.
that I actually pulled directly off the database today. So a small strip center of 50 ERUs, currently at the $25 rate, is paying $1,250 a year. That would be double if you go to $50 per year. For a larger ERU shopping center, i.e. maybe Park West, this would be one of the property areas, it has 400 ERUs calculated that it pays each year on. It currently pays about $10,000. That's 40 ERUs. So it would double to $20,000. A small bank, for instance, that's on NC 54 has only 18 ERUs. It pays $450 at $25 per ERU. That would go up to $900. So that just gives you the commercial side of the equation. Households, it would be $50.
Okay, I'm somewhat concerned about doubling the stormwater fees. I don't think businesses are all the way back from the pandemic, and I'm somewhat concerned about doubling the commercial stormwater fees.
Okay, that's a comment to be shared with your fellow council members. I would say, is there any response to that? And then I'll keep moving on with the presentation.
No, I just want to clarify, because Ann asked, what does the Chinese restaurant pay? But it's not the Chinese restaurant, it's the owner of the property gets the bill.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So the
That
owner
could be
of the
different.
property
Right.
is paying this bill, and then what he chooses to do is probably to pass that on and increase the rents for his individual owners, or his individual tenants, rather. So
That's a good clarification point. Yes, it is based on the property owner that could have multiple tenants in that particular case, that as Mayor Pro Tem has said, they could choose to pass on that increased cost.
Do you want us to go down the line and sort of share thoughts as we wish, or do you want to continue?
Yeah, I would like to hear what everybody else thinks. I'm just raising it as a concern of mine.
Yep, understood. Councilmember Rao?
I've had a couple of businesses express concerns about, the larger, from Ravati, that they'd be paying so much when times are just not getting back to where they were. So the larger ones like Park West, we already know that they're having challenges and the rent's already high. We're going from 10,000 to 20,000. So I'm not so concerned about the smaller ones, but I didn't know whether there might be options of phasing it in, or is that really going to hit our capacity? We know if that's the case and staff thinks that we need to do this, then I'm fine with it. But I feel like if there's a way we can phase it in over a few, maybe a 2-year period, or I don't know, just I'd be curious as what the options are rather than just a flat out doubling. But I realize that it could minimize capacity in other areas. So that's my thoughts. But I share your concern.
I would just say that when we initially put this in place, we pretty much did the minimum. So we've been playing catch up for a while. If you bring that chart back up, you'll see that the future funding is $10 million. So even at 50, we're doing just very small chunks. So everything's becoming more and more expensive. And according to the data provided by staff, we're still one of the lowest ERUs in Wake County.
Correct.
So I understand the concern that this is hard right after COVID, but I think it's important that we go ahead and make these investments now. And it's really equitable. Everyone's paying their fair share. So if we want to, it's actually cheaper in the long run to try to get ahead of some of these now.
I understand
my
that,
opinion.
but I don't necessarily think that the fact that we're playing catch-up, I don't feel like that necessarily flies as a justification for hitting business owners with a doubling of a fee that they've been paying, especially like, God, I didn't know anybody was going to get hit with, $10,000 or more. I mean, I just feel like that, I understand we're playing catch up, maybe we should have done it years ago or whatever our situation is, but I'm not sold on that as a justification for slamming the whole thing down now. I think that's a lot. We just did hit people with a 3% increase.
3 cent, yeah.
3 cent, whatever. I mean, I think that we gave the impression that that was going to be it.
So
Remember,
if I could
it is not just about a fee, it's about water quality. It's about the responsibility of what impervious surface does to the runoff of water. And it's about mitigating that responsibility and meeting the mandates that we all have a part in the state. So it's not just about the fee, it's about what you need in order to be able to effectively address and mitigate water quality, improve water quality. Mark, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, I think.
Yeah, and of course, this is a question that council will have to grapple with. This recommendation is based on your complete and unanimous support of this proposal just in January. So I do feel it's important to remind you of that. We didn't arbitrarily come up with this number. When we talked about the solid waste, which council immediately discontinued, and this one, there was full support. As Mayor Colley mentioned, this fee has not been adjusted since 2015, and there are the kicking of the can of the infrastructure improvements is just something we'll have to grapple with, if not this year, in future years. That will be our liability to take care of those stormwater needs.
Okay, so we had a couple other council members who wanted to share their thoughts. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, followed by Councilmember Scroggins-Johnson, please. Let's go with Councilmember Scroggins-Johnson first.
Thank you. I really do appreciate Councilmember Robati raising the fact that although this doubles the residential fee and it's a small fee, when you double the business or commercial fees, it is a significant change. So they pay large fees now, and when you double that, that is a bigger hit. I am a strong supporter of stormwater, and I truly think this is one of our premier programs. We are doing a fantastic job, but there has to be some sensitivity. Doubling a fee that's large is difficult. If we might want to explore only going up 50% of what is proposed and then the full 50% in year 2, that would give us a staggered approach, still putting us a little behind, but at least we would not be doubling the price in one single year.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, followed by Councilmember Garamella, please.
So when we talked about this, I did bring this up. I was concerned. I said that the residential, doubling for residentials was not insignificant, but comparatively to how it affects the commercial development, it is significant. I did bring that up at the time, and I was the only one that brought that up. I do think this is a major hit on the commercial development, and I'm concerned about that. And I do have complete faith in the stormwater program and the projects that would be incorporated that we talked about through our stormwater master plan study. And I do believe that they are necessary, but I do also think that a doubling is a little rough from $10,000 to $20,000. Now, you could look at in that example Jeannie gave us, you could look at that and say, well, that's Park West Village. They're going to spread it out over multiple tenants, and it'll be insignificant. But I think it's significant to the smaller developments. So I would ask Jeannie if you could please give us maybe this is part of the Q&A, could you please give us some of the examples you just talked about? Can we have those in a Q&A so we can see them? I do really good reading versus verbal, so I would like to see those examples so that I can understand exactly what the differential is for the commercial developments. If you could just give us the examples you gave are fine. If you can add any more, that's fine too.
May I ask a clarifying question? Is it specifically small mom and pop businesses that you're worried about? Or are you just looking for a nice cross section?
Personally, I'm looking for a cross section.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Others can weigh in. I wanted to get two clarifications. So early on you said that we are not eligible for the ARPA funds. Is that, why is that?
We can't demonstrate a hardship, meaning we do not even really qualify for CDBG grants anymore, so we don't have that income component. We're able to, we have the ability to raise revenues in order to be able to handle our needs. And there are other jurisdictions that do not have that kind of ability, that those programs are really geared towards helping find ways to tap into and do the responsibility of stormwater management, whereas we have an existing program, we have a fee, and we have the ability to increase it if we needed to.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing, you did give examples of what other communities are charging for their ERU. And clearly we are below all of those examples except Wendell, thank you. But how do we know, how are they administered? How do they administer their programs? Do they administer them similar to us? Are their ERUs equivalent to our, like you said, I think you said 2,800 square feet?
2,800 square feet. Some of them are slightly different. I can give you a breakdown. I would need to get with Ben in order to get that level of detail again. I will also say that some others are increasing their fee. We're still collecting peer community information. Folks are just now sort of rolling that out. So when I get all that information, I can add that to the FAQ also, that it does include stormwater fees. Where are they proposing to increase or not, or stay the same? But currently, this is what we're recognizing is the fees for those communities.
Okay, and then can I assume then, and I hate to assume, that others are not charging a fee if they're not on this?
Correct. So when I give you this particular chart that's updated, you'll see all the others that don't necessarily have a fee. Now, with that said, the question is, there's still that responsibility for water quality and the mandate in the state, depending on where your permit is. It's absorbed somehow either through your tax rate in those other jurisdictions, and I can work with Ben to sort of speak to which ones he's more aware of than others.
Okay. And if...
doesn't mean that there's not a funding solution. Just like with our solid waste, it's absorbed through some other source.
Okay, all right, that's good. That's all the questions I have now. Thank you.
Councilmember Garamella, please.
Yeah, throughout the year we keep talking about we need to bring up our infrastructure, and stormwater I consider as one of the topmost infrastructure because they are not cheap, they're expensive, and it requires a lot of planning. I had raised concern about Morrisville Carpenter, where after we finish the road, we're going back and digging it. It's just a matter of time. Had we had money at the time, we would have not been, going backward. But more than that, where I understand, Park West example, but I was just looking at our own Town of Morrisville Senior Center. We have adjusted, I asked Martha specifically, what is this adjustment of pricing? They said the rents increase every year, and it is adjusted up. And if you look at that particular complex, so many businesses have gone out of, pretty much they had to shut down Subway because I asked what happened. The owners were not ready to decrease the rent. Businesses were going out. So I feel like, overall, looking at this particular chart, we are trying to do the the very best without taking a hit to our town development. And keep in mind, we are limited with our tax bases. We are just pretty much a few hundred acres left, and it's a redevelopment. And if we don't do this, it's going to come and bite us. And I think it is a step in the right direction because as much as I understand Liz and Ann talking about the commercial, and commercial is 52% off, Morrisville. So it will be a good amount of this one, but not at the grand scheme of plan where the tax assessment is coming in 2 years. Their property evaluation, everything is going to go up. They can't basically fight that. So, and that's for us. I think we do it. We can basically get most of our projects done. If not, it's basically a tax increase backwards to us to get these things done.
Councilmember Fender, please.
Thank you. I agree with what everyone has said. However, I like Councilmember Scoggins Johnson idea of staggering the increase, do an increase of half, 50% now, and then either 6 months or a year do the next 50% increase. So it's not a doubling factor all at once.
Okay, thank you. Everyone's had a chance to weigh in at this time. I'd like to circle back to Councilmember Rabati.
Yeah, actually, as I look at this chart, I'm struck by the fact that if we did 50% of the proposed hike this year, right, that would be $1,250, and we would be at $4,750. If in
$3,750.
2 years, $3,750.
$3,750.
All right.
Yes.
All right. You know what? It's been a very full day. Okay. I didn't know there was going to be math. All right. We'd be at $3,750. If, let's say, in 2 years we went to 50, 2 years after that we could go to 6,250. We would still be in line with all the other municipalities. It would help us to catch up from what we're, like we would be caught up by the 10-year mark. And then, so then that would put us in line with the other municipalities, and we would be able to prepare people more. People would have more time to say, okay, it's not going to be 10,000, it's going to be 5,000. That's still not, I wouldn't want to pay it either, but we all have to do our part for stormwater. And then, because I think that if people know, they can make those rent calculations accordingly. They can, I think it's just easier to plan in that case. And with a hike of, rather than 100%, it would be 150%, but it would be over 6 years. I think that's fair, or 5 years or whatever we decide it's going to be. But anyway, that's a potential solution that I just thought of. Thank you.
So we've gone through, everyone had a comment on that, Mayor?
Yep, I believe so. We had a couple of people who wanted to phase it. Some people were non-committal. A couple of people wanted to keep it just the way it is. So maybe you can bring us back a couple of options for our consideration for next time.
So when I ran a few in the model that my cohort here had prepared in the assessment and evaluation, because I'll remind council, we have been talking about this particular step for a while. It's intentionally talking about it because the community needed to hear where were we headed, to be transparent. When I ran a few additional models and did a staggering term, and you've picked up on this, you have lost ground if you don't increase it to where we think we need it today based on how cost is escalating. You lose some ground. But Councilmember Rabati said, well, by the end, you actually get to a rate that potentially is higher and you make up that ground. So across a model that might tier it, you could potentially do that. But I would say it went up to $60 at that time by the time I got to the final tier. That's just a scenario that you actually have picked up on, and to make up that ground, to still maintain it at a potentially fundable level. Again, I'm reminding you, this isn't a fully funded program that has been presented. It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid between trying to get the first 5 years off the ground, get a fee set where it needs to be, get a person in place to deliver the program at the level it needs to be delivered, and then work on debt funding for the next 5 years and hope that you're able to build better reserves than what your conservative model has shown. So yes, staff can certainly bring you back, again, other scenarios, a few, that may consider to work within the same intent that this one is looking for. But mind you, it could be that it ends up being a fee on the last tier, something higher than $50 as a result to make up ground.
Councilmember Garamella.
So Jeannie, what is the total amount of ERU for the town of Morrisville?
I'm sorry?
What is the total amount of ERUs that we have for town of Morrisville?
The total that makes up the full funding source of the $580,000 in revenue?
Yeah, how many ERUs is that?
It's about 22 to 23,000 ERUs in total that get billed. I'm right. Yeah.
So,
Checking the source here.
And also, because last time I asked, how much are the commercial component and how much is the residential component to it?
You mean the split?
Yes.
It's about 56% commercial right now.
I get that part, but when you come
Oh,
to
you mean,
ERUs,
I can put that in the
ERUs
FAQ.
point of view, because
I got
the
your
parking lots
question.
occupy more ERUs and other things. Wanted to see how much are we talking when they're totally at a broader spectrum.
Yes, sir. I can get that for you in the FAQ. I do not have that off the top of my head. All right, Mayor, do we need to move this conversation forward? Are we ready?
I believe so.
Okay, I appreciate the comments and input, and staff will work on your request and put that information in the FAQ. So let's talk about fund balance and our debt service, where I currently have readjusted. Of course, I would say that with the caveat that I would prefer to work with our financial advisors to make sure that I have their input of where they see our debt model going in the future. But this is based on the current CIP that's proposed for the general fund. So with fund balance, through the year, we've actually been drawing down on fund balance this year at probably a much greater level than I've seen in a while. Some examples of that would be $2.5 million to take advantage of the opportunity that came before us with the Church Street Park expansion for the cricket. And we actually had some land acquisition opportunities that we wanted to act quickly on that we did not have other bond monies readily available to do so. So those have been things that we have drawn down on that fund balance actively. The availability of fund balance is a critical measure for credit rating agencies. So when I stand before you today and say, I do not support as a staff person in my analysis of increasing fund balance above the 4% that we've already programmed in, I say that with having a weather eye on the horizon of what's to come. And that is that we have to prepare our financials in fiscal year 23 to allow our fund balance to replenish. When credit rating agencies look at municipalities and their fund balance policy and how they live to it or not live to it, it could be the difference between a AAA bond rating and something less than. It is that critical. We learned that through this particular process. Especially, we had to deal as staff with a number of questions on how we have been drawing down and using our fund balance. Mind you, most of it has been for actually capital projects and moving things forward that impact economic development, which is a positive perspective, but other pieces of it has been each year that we have appropriated a significant amount of money to balance our budget rather than allow ourselves to live within our revenues to expenditures. So we've been using fund balance to balance our budget for a number of years, and that's a pattern that has developed. And we have been drawing down, or our fund balance has resulted in accordance to our policy. Let me remind you what the policy is. When I make this decision and make that statement so directly and boldly to you, I base it on the policy that says your target is 45% of expenditures less transfers. In the past 4 years, we have been between 35 and 40%. That we have been below policy. Your policy says anything above 45%. You can leverage that for capital outlay. You can leverage that for one-time things. We have been using and putting it, obviously, to good use as we communicated with our credit rating agencies. But I wanted to share that with you because of the amount of questions that we had, and what we learned through this process is how critically important it can be to our credit rating in the future. We need to be looking forward to what's going to occur. We will be re-credited, re-looked at for our fiscal year 2024 bond issuance that's coming up. We'll have to go through this process again. The financials that will be used will be from fiscal year 23. What we had to communicate to them is that we had a plan to allow our fund balance to replenish. That's a part of your policy, is that you can use it, but it takes time to rebuild it. And they want to know that we are looking long-term and strategically and allowing it to replenish and rebuild to our policies. And we have been measured for our policy as having a healthy policy position that's comparable to other AAA-rated communities when we asked Davenport to look at that. Does our policy need to be adjusted, in other words? The answer is no. We have a very good policy that works for Morrisville. So with that said, the other thing that is equally as concerning to me as a budget evaluation or budgeteer person is what we already know we're dealing with today, and that is cost escalations. We have a tremendous amount of projects that we're trying to move and transact, and my concern is not allowing our fund balance to replenish itself to have that healthy cushion. We're going to need that in case we're continuously dealing with cost overruns. That's going to be our source we're probably going to have to look to, because we've already tapped and planned our debt capacity. Remember, in our model, we were projecting to exceed in some years our own policy for debt ratio recovery. So in looking and playing the long game, my suggestion is to allow it to stand. I've already pushed it above the 3% that I feel is a comfortable margin that tends to be recoverable. I've already pushed it above that. You have a budget that I think meets the needs that you communicated through and the community has communicated through in different ways, through sustaining core services, finding the ability to leverage other sources to have quick, small project wins, moving and planning to the future for future project wins that we know we need to do, and then having a healthy fund balance that will help us get there in the end. So that would be my statement to you when it comes to fund balance and where I see it at this point. And I do, in my projections, do what is called a worst case scenario. But if it weren't for the fact that we've already drawn down on fund balance this year, and I'm looking ahead at what the things that we need to mitigate for, that would be my position at this point, is to stay where we're at. So
Can I just ask a clarifying question? You mentioned earlier that our policy is 45%. Is my understanding from the last 8 years doing this, our policy is between 25 and 45.
So in the language, it says target is 45%. Anything above that can be easily used for those one-time sources. You do not want it to go below 25%. So that gives you a range, but your target in the language is to stay at 45%.
Okay, understood. And the legal requirement is 8%. So even our policy is 3 times more than what is required. So we've got a pretty safe policy, pretty conservative.
I say we have the appropriate policy for a town of Morrisville that has fixed boundaries, that will have limited potential in the future to really annex and build and grow that tax base. So when I break it down, so you guys have seen this pyramid where I break down that 8%, the 25%, and the 45%. So let me put some context around that. 8% is the bare minimum that LGC recommends. 8% is $2 to $3 million. That is not enough to cash flow Morrisville's needs when I look at the operational ratio between revenues and expenditures and when they go out first quarter to second quarter. Remember, your largest 56% of your revenue income doesn't come in until the second and third quarter. So take that into account. 25% is about 6 to 9 million, and that represents about 3 months. That is just getting you the cash flow. So 45%, the reason why Morrisville has 45% is because that's getting you some cash flow and getting you the ability, which is, by the way, 6 months is roughly about 12 million, almost 13 million for Morrisville. And I'm using historical information to base that on. What that gets you is it gets you the ability to cash flow, but it also gets you the ability to handle natural disasters. One of the questions that we dealt with the credit rating agencies was, where's your fund balance? What have you done with it? Can you mitigate? Are you financially solvent? Because in North Carolina, one of the most important things for a municipality is if you are dealing with a flood, a hurricane, is they want to know that you are not going to impact the taxpayers. You're going to be able to handle and mitigate quickly and react to natural disasters. And that's why they use those terms, emergency, unforeseen needs. And that's why our policy is 45 or above as a target.
And I'll add, the LGC does not see 8% as satisfactory anymore. They are requesting people to bring up to a minimum of 25%. There is a recent and local situation where that is occurring.
Understood. So that's very helpful. In the past, I really like this chart, and it shows how we've really taken advantage of opportunities as they come before us. So that's what the fund balance is all about. In the past, we've budgeted fund balance often, and it's my recollection that generally staff comes back and says that we actually didn't need to use it.
Generally, yes. You always want, again, my reasoning for being so bold today is staying within that 3% margin has proven to work, that revenues exceed expenditures. Now, we've had some very unusual years in the past few years where we've not only tried to advance projects, but we've had impacts to our cost, we've had impacts to our revenues, and yes, they have proven positive, but there have been years in the past where it has been much closer, and this year, as a result, could potentially be one of those years. Because again, we're dealing with cost escalation that we're having to absorb as we speak right now in our operations. I told you, inflationary factors are not just capital. They're operational as well that we're dealing with. The other thing is mitigating revenue loss, and then trying to work towards setting aside funds that we need for the future.
Yep, and inflation is going to be eating up a lot of that the further we go out, too. So inflation is a two-edged sword. We know we need to address it, but the sooner we make these investments, the less it'll cost us. Councilmember Fender?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. You talked about wanting to replenish the fund balance. However, on this graph, it doesn't look like the fund balance is being replenished.
So I'm doing what is called the worst case scenario. I'm expecting in this chart that we would spend it 100% based on very conservative revenues, and I've added in future obligations of debt and had some cost escalations, factoring in additional people, growth and merit and that sort of thing. So I'm trying to use forecasting to see where the challenges and opportunities are ahead of us. And then coupling that with what I know has already been committed out of fund balance this year is trying to position us in the best way possible, knowing that there are a lot of elements that go into the calculation and factoring of what is your fund balance at year end. My best advice based on what I know today and where I think the challenges are in the future, looking ahead, inflationary costs, capital projects, wanting to stay nimble to be able to execute on land acquisitions in the future that might come up, because your next bond sale to be able to get land acquisition money is not until 2024. I would say letting it stay where it's at, getting that number measured and recalibrated as of June 30 is just a smart strategy to know where we sit, what we have available, and move forward from there.
Okay. And then when you say 3% margin, what are you referring to?
So over the years, I've just developed this evaluation strategy based on history and performance of our historical actuals. 3% of expenditures in appropriated fund balance tends to be a recoverable difference. If you're trying to balance a budget, staying within 3% is one of those rules of thumbs or best case practices that you know you could potentially recover that, because the likelihood is you're not going to spend 100% of your budget. Again, worst case scenario allows us to see where the challenges and opportunities are.
Okay, so you're saying you would stay within 3% of transferring funds from the fund balance to balance the budget.
To balance the budget. And we're at 4% right now.
Okay.
Not 4% of the fund balance, but 4% of our
4%
total
of
budget.
the total expenditures, yes.
Okay.
Our expenditures less transfers, yes.
Okay. And when you say the 3%, that's 3% of
Expenditures.
Okay.
of 46 million. Councilmember Rabati, followed by Councilmember Garamella. I think you had his hand up.
Yeah, what do the asterisks indicate on actual 2021, future forecast 2025? I don't see anything down the bottom there.
That is when you have your next round of opportunity with revaluation. So the revaluation process will occur in 24. You have an opportunity to potentially right-size your operations and your tax rate to align it in 25 with that adoption of that tax rate. So that's what that indicates.
Okay. That's all I had.
Councilmember Garamella?
Going back to what Donna is saying, but the 3% is also the 3% growth in our tax base, right?
Right.
So pretty much whatever the tax base you're getting, I see like you're utilizing, even though you're taking from the fund balance, is technically the growth factor you're factoring into the budget.
So it all works. It's
How you
all
put it.
working together. A conservative revenue approach, a smart strategy in using your fund balance, being aware of what's on the horizon, and just being smart about that, and how much we use it or not use it, and what we use it for. I'd say they were very interested in that we were using it for projects. Had we used it for other things, it would have been even more of a big question. So again, I'm thinking of the future. I'm thinking of the inflationary cost that I know is ahead of us, and being able to give us a cushion to work with to get things done.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, please.
So I'm in total agreement, Jeannie. I think it's really important for our fiscal position to be mindful of what we're using out of the general fund. And I will tell you, quite frankly, when I saw the 4%, that gave me pause. But I understand, and it's important to remember that the fund balance is not a number; it's a percentage
Of a number that changes every year.
Yes, and so that is, it's not like we're chasing an actual number. We're chasing a percentage, which is harder to recoup. So I always am mindful of what we're using, although we have been successful in the past of not using it all, or in a lot of cases not using any of it. But I think it's important for everything you just said. So, and I will just add, I was on council when it was Governor Easley who withheld some of our state funds in the middle of a budget year. So when you talk about a disaster, when we have already, in the middle of a budget year, you're already got contracts underway. You're already committed a lot of money, and that general fund money came in very handy and was very important at the time. Of course, we also did a lot of work of eliminating spending across departments, but I think you need to be careful of that, and that's why a general fund is so important.
Councilmember Scroggins Johnson.
Thank you, Jeannie, for giving us that overview. I am very mindful of the unassigned fund balance policy line as you've laid it out, and we have had, a significant amount of what I call available funding in previous years, as late as 2021, but now we are really maximizing the value for the public. And the bonds are putting more debt in our overall picture. So I've been looking over this budget trying to find, extra stuff or whatever, but it just seems like you've really delivered something where there's no flexibility right now. We're seeing inflation in projects, and that gives me pause to, I think, is our unassigned fund balance high enough? I mean, should we be even looking for more capacity because of the inflationary factors and so forth? But, I mean, for this cycle, I guess we can wait and see, but I just expect that we're going to have to be a little more aggressive next year with a lot of costs increasing across the board.
Town Manager Page.
Thank you. I'd like to add that when we talk about that 4% fund balance appropriation in this year's budget, staff held ourselves accountable to minimizing that. We had other requests for continuation or expansion of projects that council has really already endorsed that have not been put into this budget to maintain that for ourselves. We've also communicated to council that the second tranche of the ARPA monies is part of our work plan for the coming year to identify and just continue those discussions on what your priorities are for those types of projects, which was just another reason why constraining ourselves was the fiscally responsible thing to do with this presented budget.
Okay. It was mentioned the asterisk for 2025, and staff has brought up in the past the ability to build capacity during revenue, during revaluations. We cannot commit future councils, but I'm hearing that we might have to tighten our belts a little bit next year or the year after. And we can keep saying that, but it's easier to commit to doing that now. So I'd love the council to start considering the idea of actually gathering that capacity in 2025 and keeping the tax rate the same, and let the increased property values around town actually help get us back to a funding that doesn't seem so much like underinvestment. In the past, there's been a little bit of a challenge trying to meet our needs. We still are very short on Parks and Rec, land, other things. Staff just said that they really put everything back that we've already committed to. So I know that's a big thing. That's 2 years in the future, but that is definitely something that I think would be important for us to consider, starting at the property tax rate rather than starting at revenue neutral. So that's a discussion we usually have at the time, but if we start thinking about it now so people can plan, because it's important for businesses and people to understand what might be coming, because they know that their property values are going up. So does that mean that they should pay the same taxes for much more value? Because that's what revenue neutral is. Or if they want to really invest in a town, and in November they said that we want to invest in our future. We're willing to pay a little bit more to live in a better town. And this council asked the residents what they wanted, and the residents said, these are the things we want. So this is just the start of a discussion in that direction, and I'd like to recognize Councilmember Scroggins Johnson, followed by Councilmember Garamella.
So I feel I have to respond to the 2025 reevaluation. There are a lot of people that are not from North Carolina that are moving into the area, and they do not understand the cycle of reevaluation in Wake County being on 4 years. The prices of homes in the last 12 months have almost doubled in Morrisville. And so if you take the same tax rate for an $800,000 house that now is $1.6 million, and say, well, we're just going to leave the tax rate the same, that is going to be very destructive to our commercial business and the homeowners. I understand that there's an opportunity to make an adjustment to further invest in the town, but we have to be responsible and we have to be mindful of the impact as well. I'm not saying that there isn't an opportunity, but leaving the tax rate the same is not going to be a possibility. We have to first start with revenue neutral to understand the total impact, and then we can have discussion about what that would mean and the potential that it brings.
Councilmember Garamella.
No, I kind of agree. 2025 is far ahead. We don't know what the values are. You know, if the recession hits, it goes down. Still long way out to even consider that. I'm going to say, like, we had a discussion about solid waste, you know, and that is still an option if the council wants it, because the rest of the towns has a separate fee. We don't. So all those opportunities are still there, and I think we should, if not this year, next year for sure, bring that up, because we got to be equitable and look at all the towns. When we are looking, we compare ourselves to other towns. We should also compare what they're doing in terms of their fees and other structures too. So it doesn't go one way, it goes both ways in terms of fees and what they're doing. I think because we should start with solid waste as one of the things, because I fear the contract, even if it is going to go up significantly high when it comes up for renewal. And I don't think we would be at a point where we may have to increase taxes just for that, because Kerry went through this whole process for the renegotiation a couple of years ago, and it was very hard.
Anything else on fund balance, or should let Ms. Hooks continue? Okay.
I'll just make one quick comment. I agree with both Councilmember Garamella and Councilmember Scoggins-Johnson. I think it's a little premature to talk about 2025 today. There are a lot of conversations that have to happen between tonight and the budget, for FY25. So I think there are lots of opportunities and things to talk about, and we'll see where we're at in 2025.
My long-range modeling, I model actually revenue neutral intentionally because that's what I consider worst-case scenario. So when you look at your fund balance and your debt ratio, it's based on that conservative approach. But that is your opportunity that you might have to be able to realign. In all things in Budgetopia world, it is a balance between resources, capacity, and affordability. And affordability meaning, what is your community willing to leverage? You found out with your voter-approved bond referendum that they were willing to do 3 cents. So that's just one of those indicators that you have to give them something that they're interested in and value, and they need to see and materialize that tangible result. So let me move you ahead. We've been talking for almost an hour. Let me just touch quickly on debt ratio. I just recalibrated this based on where I think I see the debt based on the first issuance. One of the significant pieces was shifting public works out. And in the Q&A, I actually addressed the question of what's the impact of shifting it out. I will say in short, that project has a lot further to go to progress, to know what we're really dealing with, even the timing. The fact that I kept it within the planning years of the CIP was the critical piece. It's still in the window, it's still an active project, and as the critical piece is going to be working with our financial advisors to really do that hard look at our debt model to see if there's any ability to move it back forward. But in the MOU, it allows for both parties to work together collaboratively. It calls out that ability that they need to agree together on the timing and the cost and when things would start and when things would end. And one of those factors is even when we would be required to pay, whether it be on the front end, progress payment, or at the end, when the project is complete. Those all are things that need to be refined. There's a long way to go and more information for that one. So in pushing it out, I was able to improve the debt ratio model. If I moved it back to 2024 in the year that I'm trying to do bond issuance, we are well above 19% in the modeling. So as a result, I've shifted it. I've tried to rebalance the window and also trying to move forward a considerable amount of unfunded projects, i.e. Town Center, and creating a solution and a result to keep Crabtree Creek Nature Park on point and to pull Town Center Green forward, as well as some other projects. So in a nutshell, more to come on debt service as I work with the financial advisors and recalibrate that. So other topics to talk about. And I'm going to try to move through these quickly because I promised you I was going to try to keep it as brief as I could. And Martha, please feel free to jump in. So for long-term staffing, as the community expands, we talked about McCrimmon Parkway Extension. That's a new area of expansion. As we expand in our community and grow within the 10 square miles, service expectations are going to grow. We need to be mindful of that and look ahead. There will be resources required. And to meet and to stabilize and sustain quality core services that our community knows, our departments have projected forward in a 5-year window long-term staffing projections to meet those future needs. And we're talking here, I believe, about $5 million in potential additions based on current known market conditions today. So Martha, anything you would like to add on this one?
So Jeannie's accurate. As we talk to our departments about what you see as your future needs, we haven't done a lot of vetting. We're going to do a little bit more assessment of some of those future needs to determine really what is driving the request, what influences that request, so that we have that information to provide to determine where on a spectrum it is of coming forward, how urgent or essential it is, other ways to do it, just at a a deeper level, so that we have more information to share as we would consider how and when to bring staffing on. So as Jeannie mentioned, some of it is driven by just our normal activities. The more buildings we have, the more grounds we have, the more right-of-way we take care of, the more athletic events we have. All of those things create resource demands on our staff. Just the amount of transactions we process creates additional administrative support, additional population, either business or residential, creates public safety needs, those types, but really getting more into detail about really understanding how that may forecast out over future years. When Jeannie currently forecasts, she does not incorporate all these position requests. So we're going to really try to define that, so that's in part of our model for some of the future discussions we have in future years, since it is a significant number that may be looking at us ahead.
I project a flatline modifier to account for growth in the future, not specific positions.
It's a pretty sobering statement, and I haven't seen anything about how we are per capita as compared to peer municipalities. We usually do that, and generally we're running pretty lean.
We are a lean organization.
So I look at this and I'm like, we've committed that it's only 3 pennies this year. We've sort of made that promise, but we can't just keep kicking the can down the road. The traffic safety unit was asked for years ago, and we're adding a person or 2 every year, but I just urge us all to really think about how next year, if we're really going to keep the town's quality, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. And I know it's easier to talk about doing it next year, but when the rubber hits the road at budget time, this time next year, I'm looking forward to some really good discussions.
Okay, so let me move us ahead. So in looking to the future, there are some big subject matter areas that could impact future recurring cost in our base budget. And some of those influences are going to stem from really your policy development as it relates to affordable housing. That's a question mark. We don't know how that will impact, but it could could result to some operational influence that we need to sustain year over year to be able to commit to that policy or that initiative. The other one is putting in place a smart shuttle and expanding that based on customer interest. It is a subsidized program, and it's not funded by a fee, but there's interest, and as interest grows, if that's something we need to expand, then we need to plan for that, and that will increase our impact to future base budgets. It's currently supported by a grant, but grants have a sunset at times, and right now we're good, but it's something you have to keep a weather eye on. We are out of space. When I look at our leases, we're over $200,000 potentially in leased space just to make room for the staff that we do have. And that could be something that's committed to some other areas or programs. To be innovative, it does cost us. In the long run, we do need to plan for those initiatives. It isn't a one-time impact. When we put programs in place for sustainability, for smart city solutions, we got to take care of those things. There's assets that potentially come with those. Solar panels would be a perfect example. There's a replacement factor. There obviously is a gain back for solar panels, but some of the other items through the smart city solutions, you get data, you get information, but there's a cost that we have to account for to maintain it that can escalate year over year. And it's not just a one-time impact. So these are some of the things that when the town manager and I sort of look at what's on the horizon that we need to be mindful of, these would be the 4 big ones. It doesn't mean that that's all of them. So some future discussions that we're going to come back to you on, and I'm going to wrap us up here, are small businesses and really what we're going to do with this $300,000 grant. We have some additional information we're bringing forward with council. We have an actual database now that we're capable of filtering and getting down to some really great details that we're learning to use right now to be able to refine and define what is Morrisville small business. Then we have resources that we publish on the web, and then we have other things in our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce and other entities that we can explore. So more conversation to come on that in the future. The municipal service district is something that we just have to pay attention to going forward in the future, is that you have one final neighborhood that we need to be working towards, and we set aside cost each year, and we subsidize it and have been subsidizing it from the general fund almost since it was conceived. So the 10 cents has never been enough to fully fund that program for the number of neighborhoods that actually ended up joining and petitioning for that. The 10 cent was based on a much larger economies of scale is what really built that, but the folks that ended up petitioning were only 5. So as a result, we've had to feed it money from the general fund each year. So think about what that money could be repurposed for in the future if we could just get past accumulating enough for the Gables and get past that.
But just to confirm, we are getting all that money back that we're subsidizing. That's part of what they're going to be repaying in the future.
It would be a part of the repayment process, yes.
20 years in the future over time.
Right, so it's $110,000 each year that's interest-free, essentially, that we're putting forth. So I get it.
So currently, the numbers were landing on 2041, I think, for the payback period. Again, cost escalation is where it could get us. When I recalibrated the estimate for Gables based on just using CIP influences, it was potentially approaching $2 million. If that's the case, then the monies that we have currently in a reserve are clearly not enough, and it will take a little bit longer than even what I show here in 2025 as potential accumulation. So again, cost inflation is something we have to be mindful of, and how we need to have reserves and ability to react. One final thing to talk about here is rental properties, and i.e. specifically town center. Town center, as it becomes more refined, council needs to consider, is it time for us to be moving away, proactively addressing those folks that are in that area that have historically become a part of this rental program. We need to be moving away from that. And that takes care, thoughtfulness, and time but it's something we need to consider doing now. We are going to be moving quickly as an agreement is formulated, and we need to make sure that we're good neighbors to those folks that have worked with us over the past as we acquired property and allowed them to stay and figure out how they can move on. So that's just some things that we need to talk about in the future as to how we can work through that with the utmost care, but proactively. So from here, I am going to say I appreciate everybody's comments. I appreciate you allowing me to sort of take a bold stand on fund balance. I do that with a strategic mindset to set the stage for Morrisville success. One of the things that our credit rating agencies raved about Morrisville is the fact that we are long-range planners. We are strategic in how we approach and problem solve, and we look beyond tomorrow or what's currently in front of us. And that's a critical win in Morrisville's box and a practice that we need to hang on to as we look ahead. So I appreciate that. We have captured some questions that we'll add for your FAQs, some good information. I did hear that you're interested in, just a quick recap, you're interested in maybe a more tiered approach to the stormwater fee. I did think I also picked up on generally you're good with the budget overall. I didn't hear any concerns or issues about the operational side of the house or perhaps the general fund CIP. Did not hear anything on that. And what I did hear of potential change was the stormwater fee and the stormwater, which would impact the stormwater CIP. So that's, in a nutshell, the recap. Mayor, I'll hand this back to you, or I'll ask actually Town Manager Page, do you have any final comments from you before I hand it over to the mayor to open the floor for final closing questions?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor?
So we're scheduled to take a break at about 7:30, so we can sort of just share some thoughts as we get started. Staff has put forth a situation that as a growing town with limited resources, we're challenged to meet the needs that have been demonstrated and that we've shared with our community and they've shared with us. So at this time, it's very difficult to add anything more to this budget and add value. We've had our input already to a large extent, but if anyone has some very small dollar value items that they think could make a big difference, show some visibility. Right now, I think our main talking points about this budget are doing the dog park, and what was the other big one?
Marshall expansion,
Marshall
basketball courts,
basketball
road
court and
project,
Shiloh. Those
intersection
are
improvements.
our big ones. And we're doing a really good job of taking care of our staff and retaining and attracting great staff. But that's something that's maybe not as visible to our residents. So does anyone have anything that they want to share that they think would really help us really show the residents that this budget is for them? Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Well, I think this budget is for them.
Obviously.
That's the idea every year.
Anything extra?
I just want to ask two quick questions so that I understand these two items. On page 31, there's a item that's called material-based budget adjustment for $400K. Jeannie, that is actually broken out into all the departments where it lands, but you're just kind of summarizing it here for us, right?
I did. So those were material inflationary cost factors. So i.e. one of them, that interesting enough, is fuel, but the cost is distributed across the departments that need those fuel dollars, additional fuel dollars. Mostly that is your service-oriented folks that are on the road, your police, your fire, and public works needed a boost in that area just to deal with the inflation. And then obviously professional service costs, utilities, they all have an inflationary factor associated with them. And those are distributed from IT to public works to planning and across the board.
Okay, thank you. I thought so, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't reading wrong. And then let me ask one more question too, and I should have asked this the last time. On page, and I'll do an example, like on page 53, under governing body, and you do this in a couple of instances, but on page 53, you have, operation costs, capital outlay, transfer from the general fund. And then underneath that, there's a listing of the budget priorities. I'm assuming those budget priorities are wrapped into the operations number or the,
Yes.
okay,
Yes,
in
they are.
each instance, because there's a couple of them, right?
So in our base budget philosophy, we try to call out what's changing.
Okay.
So I would consider the items on your budget priority summary are the things that are materially changing above a base budget, increasing or are one-time items. And then I also try to align it on this particular schedule. What department would those material things be falling in, and how does that look in comparison to how their budget to actual shows in that year? And be mindful, this is not a budget to budget, this is a budget to actual. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And then just a general, I think, I'm pleased with what's in the budget now. There are a lot of projects that are funded in here that our residents are asking for and want and need. Obviously, not everything is in here. It never is every year. And we all need to prioritize as best we can. But I do think that the smart shuttle expansion, the dog park, the basketball court, the road projects that are in here, the intersection improvements, which will help tremendously with traffic congestion at intersections, which I just came through, by the way, so I'm looking forward to. Anyhow, I think that's all important, and it improves the quality of life for our residents. And I am appreciative of all the work and the hours that you all put in, but that council did. We have talked about budget over many meetings since the beginning of the year. Actually, I think we're always talking about budget, quite frankly.
I feel like I'm always talking about it.
Yeah, you are always talking about budget, but I mean, we really focused starting on our winter retreat and then all the meetings that we've had coming into this. So I thank you, because you obviously once again listen. I sound like a broken record because I think I say this every year. You listen year round to what each one of us says, and you try really hard to incorporate what we want into the budget, and not only us, but the community with their input year-round, and of course their input through the budget portal. So I thank you. It's a balance. Everything we do is a balance. So I appreciate the dance you do every year to get us in balance. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rao, followed by Councilmember Rabadi.
One thing, I really appreciate your all's work on the basketball courts, and I think it's important that we communicate like the process of, the new courts we're looking at, the different sites, just so that, people know that our staff is actively looking for that. But I do think it's a good win that this budget is, at least focusing on the shallow renovations. So I would just ask you guys to continue to work with the community that's expressing interest in these courts. The other one that I thought could be something we look at is, and maybe IT department's already working on it, but Wi-Fi in the parks, which some of the other cities or towns are having. Just something as simple as, being in a park and being able to be connected. Since our brand is Live Connected, Live Well, being able to be in a park. I don't know if there's any places in Morrisville where we already have that, but
Yes, sir, we do. It actually has been an initiative of theirs. We're dealing with supply chain issues on that particular project right now and getting all the equipment that we need. So there'll be a couple that will be coming online, and I do not recall the names of the parks at the moment that were on the list, but we do have two that we're trying to add in addition to the ones that we have.
Church Street Park has the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of last year's budget, right?
I just was curious as to what. And the other thing is, there's nothing immediate that I'm asking for in this budget, but I just think to be aware of, like, as we focus on, we had a great presentation a few weeks ago on cultural programming. One thing that I'd like to see is, and a couple years ago, Councilman Garamella mentioned, having like places where we could have different exhibits in the town halls of the different cultures in our community. So, we recently had a mobile exhibit on the Hindu civilization, but there's other cultures as well, so that we can sort of see when different communities came in and things like that. That might be something that we could do, and getting back to having maybe some history lectures. Ernest Dollar just wrote a new book. And so, these are things that probably already we could, we've already budgeted programming in already, but just things that I think would help, in terms of providing value.
Appreciate that.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. Councilmember Abadi, followed by Councilmember Garamella.
Yeah, I also want to thank you, Jeannie, because I think taking a conservative approach to budgeting is the only way to budget. And I think that you do a really good job of that. And I appreciate the reminders about the fund balance and the policies and all of that. So can you just remind me, what options do we have? So for example, there's a disc golf course that's already laid out at Church Street Park, right? And we're doing approximately $2.5 million of renovations at Church Street Park. So if, let's say, the cost of those renovations, if we have money left over, like whatever it's going to be, the $20,000 or whatever that it would cost to get the course operational, do we have an option to do that at that time? Because it's not in the budget, I see that, and I understand we have to give up some things. But are there any options, like if we know that the disc golf course at Church Street will cost $20,000, the basketball courts will cost $50,000, and when we know that we're not going to hire somebody that we wanted to hire, or a piece of equipment we wanted isn't available, what options do we have during the year to allocate funds to move those projects forward?
So council always has the option in the year to choose to allocate additional funds. The question is going to be, what funding source are we going to use in order to move something ahead? So I need to make sure that I understand your question. So is your question if there are funds remaining available at the end of what we anticipate as the project, that we could repurpose those? Is that your question? I sort of heard something that...
Well, so I guess I'm asking, Church Street Park is a project, right? Mm-hmm. The project is cricket upgrades. But if those cricket upgrades cost $2.4899 million or whatever, mm-hmm. and there's be money left over for Church Street Park upgrades, then can we take that money and put in the disc golf course, or does it? Okay. Is there some kind of, do we have to do something?
So I just needed to make sure I understood where you were headed with that. So just like the strategy that's proposed with this budget, that when I said it was simple but yet complicated, I was tapping multiple sources, and one prime example are projects that are substantially complete that had available funds remaining in them. That's part of the funding solution on some of these key things, i.e. one of them is the MAFC elevator. I'm using funds that were remaining in an existing capital project. It's complete. I'm repurposing it so that we can get the elevator fixed, because I feel that's critical, and moving that forward. I've made that a part of the proposal of this budget. The same thing could happen in this situation. Staff can identify, even in the middle of the year, we have remaining funds, we're ready to close this project out, and we'll present you a recommendation of where we feel it needs to go. And at that point, it's up to council to decide if you want it to be diverted somewhere else. Now, with that said, we have to also take into account what funding sources were being used for that. There may be restricted sources. So there could be restricted sources that were primarily for that project that were left over that could only be used for a specific purpose. So I couldn't take park payment in lieu and use it to fix town hall.
Right.
So there's things that we just have to evaluate. But you're right. In the closeout of a project, if there are remaining funds, staff will identify that, bring it to you, and we can propose a recommendation of how we create that solution. And if you choose it to go somewhere else, then that's your voice, the will of council. Good question. Don't always have that, so I just want to make sure. It's a unique opportunity we have this year. I think I've only had one other real time in my experience here as a budget person that had enough funds that made an impact. So in this year, one project has enough available funds to be able to fix some things that we need fixed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Garamella, followed by Councilmember Scroggins Johnson.
thanks, Jeannie, for the budget and the whole presentation. It was very helpful to me. I do have a couple of concerns, not on the budget point of view, but thinking we still have transportation. With COVID, I'm hoping, getting to an end of, it's an endemic, not a pandemic anymore, but I'm seeing the traffic in town of Morrisville, the signals and all those things are slowly increasing. The backup is increasing. And my fear is it will again bubble up as the number one issue, which is transportation. We are designing some of the projects, for intersection improvements and other things. I would really like some of the projects get done because it will come and haunt us. And I've been listening about this traffic light signalization. I think we did have funds, right, last time or something like to improve the signal.
Yeah, you're talking about the preemption, I believe.
Yeah. So those things, like, because just coming from Macraman near the Sheets gas station, like, that traffic is a mess, to be honest. Like, when I sit in the traffic light, it takes a long time, and it's not only going to get worse because the number of cars will come back more and more. So what can we start quickly looking into those before it becomes more complaints? And that's my fear that would happen over the next 1 to 18 months. And what can we do? I want the council to even think on that, because those areas will very soon pop up. And what is the status of all the DOT projects which was pushed out? Now is the money back again? What are the fresh new timelines, so that at least we can have a message? Because I don't know. We had some timelines before the COVID time, and after that, the 7-lane at Davis Drive, that was, I don't know, what's the new timeline for that? And several of the other projects which were planned.
Yeah, that's not a budget, you're correct. But I believe council requested Mark to sort of incorporate the DOT projects in some of those intersection improvement lists. And now with Danielle Kittredge as our Campo and Transportation liaison, we can ask her and Mark to work together to sort of pull together that comprehensive list. A reminder, our intersection improvement projects are not mostly on those roads that you're referencing. So pulling back some of that information is something we can put on our work list.
Yeah, and also like start pushing what can we get things done, because giving a feeling like, yes, we are doing intersection improvements, but for a layman, they say, okay, which ones, where, So that's something that. And what about the signalization? Like, we thought we were going to work with Kerry to.
And they do. They manage. I think probably some of them are out of sync because of various construction projects. So operationally, we can follow back up with Kerry on that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. But overall, I think good job.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scoggins Johnson, followed by Councilmember Fender.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Jeannie and your team and all of the staff that contributed to the preparation of this budget. I mean, it's been a very difficult, challenging, I'm sure. And I like to sometimes talk about the moving of the, goal, like whack-a-mole, the game that has whack-a-mole. And I'm sure as you were trying to move around how to get the most benefit in the most efficient way, even with our ARPA funds, thankfully we were able to get quite a few CIP projects slated for the 2023 fiscal year. So thank you so much. Already we're seeing some very positive movement. As I look forward, I know that there's a lot of unmet needs, And we just had a real gift given to us in the last month with the new high school that Wake Tech is providing space for, with a lot of changes potentially for the town of Morrisville. I'm looking forward, and I'm thinking we're going to have to add a capital improvement line item for the new amenities that are needed to help support that high school. There's some athletic amenities that can't fit on that space, so they'll look forward to, partnering with us that we might get some benefit from those amenities as well as the school system. There's also that park that is under the airport overlay, and there's a potential to do additional programming, such as a disc golf course. Instead of just a couple holes, maybe we could put a larger course there. So this is great, but I keep thinking what just happened in the last month and how that might affect some more of our prioritization in the future. But it's an exciting challenge that I'm looking forward to. But overall, thank you so much for your work. I'm pretty happy with this.
Great.
There's some, things that we'll just have to wait for next year. So thank you.
Thank you. I will add, I was proactive in the CIP. You'll notice that the Cedar Fork Community Center, I actually have it, I treat it as a placeholder, and that really is on the heels of the conversation from Wake Tech. That could be the spot where I'm trying to build in some money to be able to handle what might be coming forward in the future, but it's still an unknown. But I did purposely leave that as a funded piece of the CIP.
Awesome.
Timing will be something we have to deal with. And then, of course, you have money in your bond issuances coming forward that is specifically for parks categories. Now, you chose to really commit that more for land, but the category itself is general enough that you could choose to use the funds to build something with that's coming forward in 2024 or 2026 for those issuance. All right, Mayor, back to you.
Councilmember Fender, please.
The budget, I'm very grateful that we're finally able to put funds in here for the dog park. I know that would be a big hit and make a lot of people happy. And, the renovations for the Shiloh Park basketball court, I know will be very well appreciative. My only comment is that, I know when the residents that came during the public comments to speak, they said even if they had the Shiloh Park basketball court was renovated, it still would only be one basketball court, and that they were requesting more. So I don't know if it's possible for the staff to consider where else we could put a basketball court. I know we're thinking of maybe having one in the south lot of Church Street Park with that expansion. I don't know if there's other opportunities where we could consider adding another basketball court for our residents.
Staff's evaluating that, speaking for Deputy Town Manager Zudema, but staff is evaluating additional opportunities. It's just we haven't gotten to that point where we could say, yes, this works, yes, it doesn't. We have to we have to assess the feasibility and what we own, where it could sit, and what support structures may exist. Support structures are pretty expensive, so.
If the staff did identify a possibility where it would work, would there be funds in the budget and some allocated somewhere that would be able to be used for that basketball court, or would we have to wait till the next fiscal year?
So I'm not sure that I can answer that question until I know what fund balance position is at the end of June 30th. Again, the reason why I feel like it needs to be calibrated, that's the point in which it's measured, it becomes known. I will always say to you, it's always a matter of what is council's priorities. So if a viable solution comes up, changing influences occur. That's why we reassess the CIP every year. We take a hard look at it on purpose to see if there's opportunities, if there's challenges, to be able to address those things. So I think at this point, the best I could say is let us figure out if there is a viable or feasible solution. Let us get a known understanding of cost impact. Could, depending on where that is, that could completely affect the ability to bring it to fruition or not. And then timing is another factor as to whether it could be constructed in this fiscal year or if it's something that would have to be planned for in the future. But I think it's clear we've heard that interest, and staff is always looking. Again, we listen very intently and try to strategically plan ahead for those needs in the future.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
So, Jeannie, I just wanted to go back to the second to last slide where you talk about future discussion items. And I think in the document, are we going to talk about each one of these sometime in the fall of this calendar year? Or
This particular slide?
no, sorry, 26, next one.
Oh, next one. This one. So we actually may be bringing something back in the near future on one of these. Martha, would you like to?
Yeah, I don't know that I would tell you in the fall, but this is how we develop the work sessions, the administrative reports, the presentations that come to you to keep you informed on some of these items. And that then just has to work into your work schedule and the urgency of the item.
Okay,
So-
because the MSD one, I would like to have, obviously, that conversation to figure out if there's a way we can facilitate that project sooner than later. That is one that I realize that's a big one. I get it. That's going to be a tough one, but I was just curious when we're going to have that conversation.
So look at the FAQ and the information that I have in there. It gives you some historical information and some additional perspective. And then we can take that from there in a future conversation.
You've mentioned the fund balance June 30th. When do we actually know what our fund balance? I know it's not June.
Not
it's
June
July
30th.
1st.
No, sir. So our closeout of the fiscal year does take a period of time from July. We're actively working all the way up to probably the end of August. The earliest we typically can bring fund balance report to you is more than likely the first meeting in October, if memory serves me correctly. We usually bring you that fund balance analysis where we're comparing what we historically have done compared to where it's landed, what were the restricted sources that were carved out, and so forth. So about October is when that would occur, and it coincides when the audit's complete.
Okay. Just because the reality is we don't often do a lot of decisions to expend more money throughout the year. It's pretty much baked now. So I know there are certain other municipalities who take a look every quarter or every 6 months, and we talked about taking another look in January and trying to look at things because things are changing. It seems like we're trying to play some catch up, which is challenging, especially when you talk about like the MSD and things like that, where if we accelerate that, those are other things that we can't do. Or if we improve a park, that's parkland that we're not buying. So one thing that I think that would be really nice is just a couple of really small projects that are high visibility, like bicycle repair stations, some art and murals that we're already talking about, some portable volleyball courts, things like that, because there's talk of sand volleyball or indoor volleyball, but for a very small outlay, we could have a couple of tournaments on weekends and just sort of use our existing parks to do things like that. Disc golf, we're working on the MOU for the southern lot, and once that is firmed up and we know that it's not going to have any effect in the area that we can't really use for anything else, that would be a good time to really take a look at the disc golf and whether or not to just flip a switch on that, expend a small investment, use a lot of volunteers and interested people in the community, and try to make something like that happen. I'd really like us to focus also on the nonprofits and our policy that we don't quite have in place yet. It would be really nice for us to try to help those who are helping those in our community. It would be very difficult for us to set up any kind of system that is already in place by Meals on Wheels or Dorcas Ministries or Kieran. But if we can help them help our residents are going to be able to stay in town, because I know affordability is becoming a big challenge. So these are things that I know staff has made it very clear that we don't really have capacity to do that now, but I'm hopeful that over the next few months, we will be proactive about asking, can we do any of these now? Can we help our community now? Can we help our residents have a better quality of life sooner rather than later? Because there is a bit of us postponing these hard decisions. The 3 cents is a hard decision, asking the residents to do that. So we got their express permission. Do we have the political will to go further and provide the things that they're asking for and let them know that it is going to cost a little something? These are the balances that we have to do, the trade-offs. I'm looking forward to these further discussions as we, as a group, really try to dig in and provide more. Because this is a great budget. A lot of hard work went into this. And it was complicated yet simple, as you said. It's pretty straightforward. There's very limited resources, and you've stretched them as much as you can. And we do appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to this being implemented. One thing I do want to say is the intersection improvements, that's a lot of restriping. If we want to really move the traffic more, there's a couple of those intersection improvements that will actually move the traffic. So I would just plant that seed that if we really want to make a difference, those are the higher cost ones, but those are the ones that I feel will really make a difference for our drivers. And safety of the pavement markings is important, but moving traffic is pretty important too. And now everyone's had a chance to chime in. We're a little bit past our break, but I think we might be pretty much done. Unless, did you have something else right there? Okay. So looking forward, the next chance to discuss all this is on the 24th. We have a public hearing that'll be on the 24th and the 26th. Have there been many budget portal inputs to date?
So I gave you a copy at your place.
Oh, it's at our place, so I didn't get a chance to see that yet.
So I gave you a copy of the portal comments to date, and then I also gave you a copy of what I call a CIP project summary, just a quick cheat sheet of what the projects do.
Okay, so the FAQ is still in progress.
Right.
Does anyone have any other questions? Because we're pretty baked for the 24th and 26th, so if you have questions, now is a really good time to give staff a whole week to address them. Okay, not really seeing any. Okay, I'll pass it back to you for next steps and last words.
So next steps, as you outlined, will be our public hearing, and will be a continued public hearing to the 26th work session. I'm feeling very good that you're giving us almost really final direction tonight, is what I'm hearing. So from here, I feel like we can move fairly quickly. I will focus on what the action items are and sort of walk you through those on the 24th at the high level. So you might want to just look at those, your budget ordinance and your capital budget, and your ARPA grant ordinance, just so you're familiar with those. So as I hit the high notes on those, that you're following along with me. And then from there, I'll come prepared, working with Michael to have some scenario recommendations for the one item that you're asking us to adjust for.
Okay, and you're really good about giving us page numbers about things. If you want to send us an email later today or tomorrow about the budget ordinance ones, the ARPA.
Oh, absolutely.
Just so that we're very clear about what you want us to make sure that we're familiar with.
I can do that now, Mayor, very easily. So from page 36 through to page 50 are the items that you should review.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is all available online as well?
Yes,
as
sir.
part of this agenda and elsewhere on the web if you just type in budget in the search? Okay.
Sir. And we are advertising as frequently as we can through social media to attract folks to the budget portal So council, you are also an advocate and a resource to reach out to folks, and if anybody's interested, please point them in the direction of the portal and let them know when the hearing is. So we appreciate you doing that part as well.
Okay, and budget portal will close noon on the 24th?
Noon on the 24th.
Councilmember Rabadi, did you have something to say? I see your blue thing. I'm just
Oh, sorry.
asking. Nope, okay.
So Mayor, I think we're ready to wrap up.
And if I could just clarify, so with your 24th agenda, you actually will have 6 public hearings next Tuesday. So the first 5 are those annexation items, and then the 6th one is your public hearing on the budget. Then I don't know if there's any items past that. But we'll follow with a work session after that public hearing, so you could discuss any public comments you got, as well as the stormwater scenario is going to bring. So we've incorporated about 45 minutes into the next week's agenda for the work session for budget.
Okay.
Very helpful. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously. It is 7:46. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.